Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Turin here with another Warhammer Total War online commentary. In this particular battle, I'll be playing the Warriors of Chaos, led by these awesome aspiring champions. Definitely one of my new favorite units from this DLC, and I look forward to sharing them with you guys. Also, I did bring the true Chaos Air Force, so this is also something. I personally feel that this patch has made Chaos quite a bit more competitive, even with only the addition of 2 units, with the, well, 3 technically, but I personally am not a huge fan of the Master Marauder Horsemen, but these aspiring champions, as well as these Chaos Manticores that you can now buy on your standard roster, are very, very strong. These guys give you a very cheap option to elite infantry, essentially. If you take a look at their stats, they actually have 120 armor. They're armored, shielded, and they also have extremely high leadership. They're basically like mini squads of Chosen that are very, very resilient. And something that's also very nice about them is that they do magic damage. That's something a lot of people aren't taking into account. And in this particular meta, a lot of people, especially Dwarves, are bringing those ethereal lords. So you can see, I believe my opponent over here has all 3 of them. So Jamar Iron Fist, Throny Ironbrow, and King Loon Ironhammer. And when you're able to get these aspiring champions onto those ethereal lords, they cut them to pieces like so quickly. So these guys are very good for that. And they're also good because they do provide encouragement. So keeping them among very low-tier Marauder armies while your Air Force is, doing other things and harassing in the back line provides that perpetual encouragement, which is very, very valuable to keeping these low-tier infantry armies intact. So, anyways, my army composition, I have a front line of Chaos Marauders here. I believe I have 5 or 6 groups. I have 3 aspiring champion groups, and that's the maximum you could bring. You actually cannot bring more than that, which is definitely a bummer, but understandably, they are a unit that would be pretty cost-effective if spammed. And I'll do a testing video soon, actually showing them in different matchups, even against like greatswords, and they don't have traditional armor piercing, but against like greatswords and elite armor piercing infantry, these guys actually do pretty good considering they cost 500. I have a group of Chaos Knights here, and then I also have a Hell Cannon, which is very fun. And with the new Dwarf build, the new DLC content, the Dwarves are very good at like turtling with the Rune Lord and just, because the Rune Lord's buffs, if I'm not mistaken, do stack with the traditional Runesmith. So they're just absolute like tanks, and it's really hard to crack that Dwarven line. So bringing a Siege Cannon like this, a Hell Cannon, is very, very good for helping with that. I also have 2 Pharaoh Manticores, which cost 1,000 apiece and are extremely good. It allows Chaos to contest the skies and definitely makes them a force to be reckoned with. And they also do cause terror, so very, very strong. Then, of course, I have a Lore of Fire Chaos Sorcerer, and this is another new great addition. The Sorcerers can now be put on Manticores. So Chaos definitely got a ton of gifts in this DLC, and I'm really, really looking forward to play testing them against other factions. One of the issues henceforth is I've only really been able to test them against the Dwarves and the Greenskins, because that's all people are playing right now. But I'm really interested in seeing how they play out in the Empire matchup and those other vampire counts and all that kind of stuff. So my opponent here, he has a front line of Longbeards and Dwarf Warriors, kind of a mix. He has some Thunderers here, very, very good choice, armor piercing. And then he actually has Miners back here with blasting charges. So a bit of a more low tier infantry, but they still do have armor piercing, which is not bad. Then he has Longbeards with great weapons. He has a Goblobber, the Grudge Thrower, which is very, very cool. I'm a big fan of it. And if I'm not mistaken, it does lower leadership upon contact, which is going to be pretty good against Marauders, who, again, rout quite easily. But hopefully my aspiring champions can keep him in the fight. He has the 3 Ethereal Lords, each of which are unbreakable, which is very, very nice. And they can carry potions, but I'm not sure if he actually brought them. I can't really tell by the tooltip there. Then, of course, he has Belegar Ironhammer, a very awesome choice. Personally, I think the Rune Lord might be slightly more competitive, but again, Belegar is very good for those last stand builds where, you just have these unbreakable lords and Belegar with his Vengeance Incarnate. It's very hard to crack them at the end, and they can actually come back from pretty dire circumstances. He also has additional Longbeards back here, and I think that is it, guys. So without further ado, my apologies for the long-winded introduction. I just wanted to kind of show you guys some of the new stuff. We're going to get started. So I'm actually just going to move my Hell Cannon right up here into this pocket. This is a pretty nice little perch right here where I can just kind of tee off on his army. And he does have the Goblobber, which its range is decent if I'm not mistaken. Let's go ahead and take a look. So it has 440 range to, I believe, the 420 of my Hell Cannon, which is fine. But again, neither of them are terribly accurate siege weapons, but I do believe the Goblobber will be slightly more accurate, but he'll probably get more bang for his buck just targeting my infantry rather than targeting the Hell Cannon. So it's pretty much just going to be, a back and forth firing range with our 2 siege units here. So I'm going ahead and hiding these guys in the tree line so they don't take fire from the Goblobber, which I believe they're in range just about for. Let's go ahead and take a look here if we can get the range. Is it going to show? I don't think it is. But anyways, my forces are also advancing through the forest. So as far as this map goes, it's definitely very conducive to advancing on a Dwarvish position. He doesn't have a lot of siege though, so again, I wouldn't have been punished that bad anyway. So I'll go ahead and fast forward a little bit because there is a lot of posturing and kind of marching through the swamp here. You can see my idea is I wanted to get my forces over here. I didn't want to like march through this bog right here and then have him like be on this lip, because if you look right here on this lip, you know, he's going to get a great thunder angle. My guys are kind of like pinned in this weird, awkward position. So I decided to just run over to this open space over here and, you know, hopefully get some good results from that. So you can see my Hell Cannon making some pretty good contact. It hits this group of Longbeards, and then I immediately switch it to the Thunderers. I figure my infantry can deal with his front line pretty well, considering, you know, I have a pretty strong core here with the Aspiring Champions, but the Thunders are the big targets. You can see I make a great contact there, and that literally decimates over half of that group. They're now shaken, and that is just huge value because Thunders are a great answer to elite Chaos Infantry. Though the Aspiring Champions, they have heavy armor. Granted, these guys have armor piercing, but they also are shielded, which is really, really nice, so that helps a lot. So my opponent is continuing to take Hell Cannon damage, so he decides to move. I think his idea was to get behind this tree line here, which was pretty smart because it would obstruct the fire, but the Hell Cannon gets a pretty good arc itself, so we'll continue to fast forward as things progress. So I continue shooting. He's shooting me with the Goblobber. You can also see his Thunders getting some fire on some of my troops, which is definitely a bummer, but I do get my cav around the back of these Chaos Knights, and I do like this version of the Chaos Knights. I mean, again, I think the Lances are probably a little more cost effective, but I was really pinching pennies, and I don't think I even had an extra 100 to spend. And these guys actually do have better sustained combat stats with 50 melee defense and 42 melee attack, so they're quite strong. But anyways, my forces are advancing through the swamp here. You can see the Marauders taking most of that fire, which is pretty good. So the Marauders, you know, still confident. They have the encouragement of the Aspiring Champions, and I'm just advancing on the enemy position. So I just use these Manticores and dive them right into his missile troops. And you can see he uses the Mighty Oathstone with Belegar Ironhammer to give his troops expert charge defense, which really helps against the charge of these Manticores, actually, who have a charge bonus of upwards of 50. And you can see I land my second Manticore on the Goblobber back there. So there really it helps Chaos so much to have these extra kind of dive units you can really harass with. So in the front line, the Marauders are going to come in and do battle with these Longbeards, and the Marauders will do pretty darn well here, but he is throwing these satchel charges, which are definitely very fun stuff. But the Marauders will do well against Longbeards, and the Longbeards, you know, will be relatively cost effective against them as well. So pretty even matchup there. You can see in the front line, everything's going pretty well, and my Chaos Knights were able to penetrate the back line and are really pressuring my opponent. I had a little bit more troop density than him, so it was easy for me to get back there, but you can see the Aspiring Champions kind of mixed in, and this is something I really like, getting them mixed in the front line with low-tier troops. It really allows them to, their small numbers to, you know, to thrive, essentially. And when they do attack, they kind of attack like heroic units. Let's see if we can get you guys a little look here. They kind of have this big knockback type effect and are pretty darn strong. You can see it's kind of like watching an Empire Captain or a, you know, Exalted Hero fight, but unfortunately, I think my Hell Cannon is doing more damage than it is good, but they're very sturdy, these guys. They got great defensive stats. So in the back line, my opponent did react with some Dwarf Warriors and other troops and is bogging down my Chaos Knights a little bit. Over here, my Manticore, I believe this is my Chaos Sorcerers, though. Just so awesome that you can get all this different kind of utility out of your Sorcerers now, who previously weren't the best combatants, so now they're pretty darn strong and they cause terror and just a multitude of other good factors. So Belegar and the boys here are holding it down pretty well. I do attempt to get my Chaos Sword over here to start poking away at him because I do want him to crack his ultimate. I wouldn't call it his ultimate per se, but his Vengeance Incarnate as soon as possible, because then I can really focus him down and he'll start running, and then I feel it will greatly benefit me. So most of my front line, if we take an overhead view, was cracked. I mean, I had a very low tier infantry line, but thankfully a lot of them are coming back, and those Aspiring Champions are very tough. So I've kind of formed a little death ball here. I'm giving them the Cascading Fire Cloak, the Flaming Sword of Ruin, and with the Flaming Sword of Ruin, those Ethereal Lords are just going to get punished. You can see they're actually taking quite a bit of damage where they usually don't, but once the Aspiring Champions are able to get over here and focus on them, that's going to be really, really good for me. So thankfully, Belegar is taking quite a bit of damage from my Chaos Sword, who does have potions at his disposal still, so pretty good situation there. In the back line, I did get some Chaos Marauders. I just had more troops in general, so I was able to swing a group out and around his flank and get them back here, but they are fighting Longbeards with great weapons, who are superior troops at the end of the day, but really it's not going to be, you know, that big of a deal. The Marauders will do okay. Of course, their leadership will crack pretty quick. Another thing to note is I actually missed these guys earlier. He does have Ulthar's Raiders, who are quite good against Chaos. They have armor-piercing missiles with 45 weapon strength, and also, you know, just, you know, decent melee combatants. And I believe they do have armor-piercing with the great weapons in melee, so a pretty good choice. But a lot of Chaos builds, I think, are going to be very Marauder-centric now. So you're not going to see, like, as much, you know, of the heavy Chaos, you know, infantry compositions, because these not low tier, but these very cheap Aspiring Champions kind of can, like, make up for your lack of armor and do pretty good for you and allow you to spend your money in other ways. So, like on Manticores, for example. So right now you can see my Aspiring Champs are just laying the smackdown on Throny Ironbrow. And they do so much damage. With that magic damage, of course, as you guys know, ethereal units do take pretty substantial damage from magic units. So all these units are starting to get worn down, and I've been in games with the Greens games where it literally took me like an hour to kill. I mean, of course, an hour isn't within the time specifications of a match, but it felt like an hour of just trying to take them down with Goblins and Skarsnik and all those troops. But the Aspiring Champions are really, really good in regards to that meta. that meta perspective there. So champions are getting in here, and they also have great leadership. It's extremely high. So they usually fight till the bitter end. They're almost like Chosen. They basically are a small contingent of Chosen with a few modifications. So very cool there. In the back line, the Chaos Knights and other troops are doing pretty good, finishing off kind of this back line of Dwarves. But even still, you know, the Dwarves with great weapons, once they're able to get into sustained combat after the charge, they're going to generate a lot of good value against my troops. So you can see a lot of my Knights going down here and a few Marauders kind of lingering. But I believe he does actually have some missile troops, some Thunders who are routing, also shooting. So pressure coming from a multitude of angles. But right now, thankfully, I was able to do pretty well in the front line. And you can see these aspiring champs are doing a great job against the ethereal Dwarf Lords. And also Belegar, unfortunately, he did use all of his abilities, and the Chaos Sword was able to finish him. So at that point, you know, the battle was pretty much over. He had a few troops that were routing off. And of course, these ethereal lords are unbreakable, which is very, very cool. But the aspiring champions should have no problem taking them out. So definitely really like the new Chaos units. The aspiring champs, I mean, you guys look, they didn't rack up a ton of kills, but they did do a ton of HP damage. They knocked them back, and they kept fighting till the bitter end. And literally most of the battle, I had them focusing on the, you know, ethereal dwarf lords. So they're not going to, of course, rack up a ton of kills. Like if I had them focusing on like dwarf warriors, they probably would have had, you know, 30, 40 kills apiece. Very good unit. And also the fact that Chaos can just spam Manticores, and they're relatively cheap at 1,000 for what they can do. Just very strong. You know, you can land them, even if like they're surrounded by melee infantry, they last quite a long time. You can land them back in a group of Quarrelers, Thunders as your main line engages, and I feel it's pretty darn good. Also being able to mount your Manticore, your Chaos Sorcerer on a Manticore is very good as well. So again, great game to my opponent, the Slayer King. I look forward to seeing you again on ladder, and I hope you guys enjoyed that Chaos game. Definitely going to be posting a lot more and experimenting with you know, a multitude of different builds, but I still think the Dwarves, in terms of just tier quality, are better. My opponent's composition wasn't the best against what I brought to the table, but a really like, oh man, I've seen some Runesmith armies where it's like a Runesmith and then the Ethereal Lords and then just tons of low tier Dwarf infantry, and then they are just periodically stacking those buffs, the double stack, and it is just so hard to crack. It is extremely difficult. So definitely will need to experiment further with how to deal with those. So again, good game to my opponent. Hope you guys enjoyed that content, and have an excellent night.